Bob Dylan, legally Robert Dylan, born Robert Allen Zimmerman in 1941, is considered one of the greatest songwriters of all time and a major figure in popular culture over his 60-year career. He rose to prominence in the 1960s when songs such as Blowin' in the Wind in 1963 and The Times They Are A-Changin' in 1964 became anthems for the civil rights and anti-war movements. While he initially modeled his style on architectural forms of Hank Williams' country songs, Dylan added increasingly sophisticated lyrical techniques to the folk music of the early 1960s, infusing it with the intellectualism of classical literature and poetry. He was born in Duluth, Minnesota, although his grandparents had immigrated from Odessa of the Russian Empire, current-day Ukraine. Dylan formed several bands while attending Hibbing High School, performing covers of songs by Little Richard and Elvis Presley. His focus on rock and roll gave way to American folk music, as he explained in a 1985 interview. The thing about rock and roll is that for me, anyway, it wasn't enough. There were great catchphrases and driving pulse rhythms, but the songs weren't serious or didn't reflect life in a realistic way. I knew that when I got into folk music, it was more of a serious type of thing. The songs are filled with more despair, more sadness, more triumph, more faith in the supernatural, much deeper feelings. He began to introduce himself as Bob Dylan when he first arrived in New York. He told the media, "You're born, the wrong names, wrong parents. I mean, that happens. You call yourself what you want to call yourself. This is the land of the free." It's a side note to his history, but if you haven't heard the album Music from Big Pink by the band, it's an incredible listen. The band is the name of Bob Dylan's backup crew and was highly influential to musical artists such as George Harrison, Elton John, The Grateful Dead, and Eric Clapton.
We said, the band, we don't want any name. It's what everybody called us in the neighborhood of Big Pink.
Now to the review. But before that, let me get to the drink I'm drinking so that I can talk in front of a camera. The drink this week is Thirsty Goat, Austin Amber, and it is one of my favorite beers of all time. It reminds me of the local beer scene a lot, and it's one of my father's favorites. So it really passes down from family to family. Now, this company died during the course of the pandemic. They couldn't run anymore, but it got picked up by somebody else, and I don't know who because I haven't caught up on my beer. But it's very tasty for a light beer, and it's good for the Christmas spirit to get drunk on a little beer. Of course, you got to get drunk on something if you are going to be spending all your time with your family this weekend or week or whatever day it is today. I think it's a Wednesday, so that's all I have to say about Thirsty Goat beer, and now I'm going to give it a try. Cheers to you. Ah, man. Sometimes I feel like I grew out a beard just so I can feel the beer on the tip of my mustache there and lick it up. In the early 1960s, 19-year-old Bob Dylan arrives in New York with his guitar and revolutionary talent, destined to change the course of American music. Forming his most intimate relationships during his rise to fame, he grows restless with the folk movement, making a controversial choice that reverberates worldwide. When I first heard about this movie, I was trepidatious because it's a musical biopic, and that comes with built-in baggage that makes it difficult for it to excel on its own. They're weighed down by two major issues: the need to encapsulate the entire life of the person and the need to play all of the goddamn songs. When you focus on a major cultural force, the people want to hear about their whole life story. And that could work in a book, sure, but with a film you have such a limited amount of time. When you try to capture something so large, all of a sudden you're too zoomed out and the whole thing can sort of feel shallow. Especially in the case of musicians, the film is going to be more interested in fitting in all the hit songs because that's what's going to gain the popular appeal. Yum yum yum, beer beer beer. Well, now if you're going to zoom out and you have to fill in all their hit songs, how much time do you have for serious storytelling? Also, it forms a repetition of the artist playing a song and somebody going, "Whoa, that's so crazy," just for the artist to come back and say, "Y'all don't really get me, man," and then he gets mad at his manager. But something about this movie actually shifted my expectations for it, and it came from a review that I believe was supposed to be negative. It was some random person on Twitter, but it said something to the extent of, "I don't feel like I learned a single thing about Bob Dylan by the end of this movie." And that excited me. While I wouldn't call this one of the greatest movies I've ever seen, it did subvert the musical biopic genre and projected itself in a way that actually serviced the character it was trying to depict. The movie's script decided to scrap the whole get-to-know-the-artist angle entirely, focusing on just the performances, a decision that certainly simplified the story, but gave it a little more depth, ironically. There's an idea that I feel personally, as someone who has dabbled in music before, that by playing I'm able to release certain emotions or concepts in ways that are impossible to convey with the language, and that is quite freeing to me. This film centers that feeling and tells you that what Bob Dylan is the music that he created. Bob Dylan wanted to live and die by his art, and that was all he nearly cared about and all he really hoped for. His fame was an unfortunate byproduct of that journey, and I would say the movie focused mostly on the clash between the responsibilities he had for himself against the responsibilities the world had decided to give him. Easy enough, not even original, really. The way it hones into the performances, though, and trims the fat is what keeps it a notch above other biopics. Now, absolutely nothing works about this movie without the excellent performance of Timothée Chalamet, who has proven over the last 7 years that he will be giving out excellent performances for a long, long time. He had a strong, soft presence, and I think what stuck out to me most about him was his ability to stay patient and refuse the dramatic outburst. I know there were questions as to whether or not he'd be singing during the shoot, but I'm so glad he did because so much of the film rested on his ability to evoke Dylan during the musical acts. His voice, while seemingly cheesy at times, felt completely believable by about 15 to 20 minutes after my ears had gotten used to it. It's hard for me to call this close to his best performances, but considering I wasn't a fan of this movie as a concept, it could have been a lot worse. He's certainly the best performance here to me, but there's 2 supporting ones I also have in mind. Monica Barbaro in her little screen time was able to display the intense emotional feelings of throwing yourself into music, the gentleness of her stage presence, and the complicated relationship between her and Dylan. Like Chalamet, her strongest aspect was her ability to perform in the music numbers, playing the guitar and singing all by herself. She doesn't get a lot to do plot-wise, so it's these numbers where she has a chance to display what the character's feeling and how they deal with the eclectic soup of the soul. As for the other, I'd say Boyd Holbrook is one of the most underrated actors working today. It's hard to quantify charisma, but I feel like I can get away with it by saying that he's got it. For a character that's rarely in the movie, he's got more depth than almost anyone else, showing off ambivalence towards his declining stardom juxtaposed with a love of the art of the next generation. Usually the mentor role is a little bigger than this, but the decision to give him less screen time enhances the mystery of his character and allows it so that every time he's on screen it's a highlight of the film. Others in the movie were nice too, talking about Ed Norton, Elle Fanning, and Dan Fogler, who I root for so heavily that every time I see him in a film it feels like a win. It's a good cast, but a theme of the movie is an animosity towards drama, so they don't always have a moment to shine, instead going for a series of moments that build them as a person. And James Mangold is such a complicated director to talk about because he does some things so technically well, and some things are so basic to me. Starting with the good, I think he has such a refined and cinematic taste for lighting. He works so well with beige and yellow light as if dark shoots aren't a problem at all. It's homely and soft, really beautiful if you pause the film and take a look around the set. He also does a great job with windows. I don't know if it's natural lighting or not, but I do know as far as mid-budget features in studio films, he's the best in the business. His performances are great too. I take genuine issue with his camera work though, because while it's technically well done, it lacks any real ambition. It's conventional and comfortable with where it's at, which is a shame because I feel like so many things are above what's going on cinematography-wise. It's a situation I run into a lot with formally educated film students where there's a general consensus of what a professional shot piece of media looks like, but nothing about its technical greatness excites me artistically. Don't get me wrong, there's some great shots in the movie, but I don't feel like they came into the film looking to blow me away with the shot list, and I don't know why any film wouldn't want to at least try. The script also contains many of the other typical issues that come with these musical biopics, like the one that pisses me off to no end is that the women of the film are never three-dimensional characters, but they're always windows into the intimate life of the main guy. That's true here, it's true in a lot of these movies. It's not a wholly exciting movie, it's a movie that made some exciting changes. So with that being said, I think I'll give this film a red turtle. It's a well-executed film with a naturally low ceiling, but great performances, good set design, and great lighting. If you're a fan of Dylan, I think you're going to get a lot out of this film. But that's going to do it for me. I hope you have a happy holidays, Merry Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or whatever you're doing. Maybe just hanging out with family, opening gifts, or hanging out with friends because family is hard for you. Well, just have a good December either way. The stressful time is almost over. I can feel it. There's so many movies coming out, it's stressed me the hell out, and I've been sick the last couple days. But I'm hoping that this beer will help me out. I know it won't, but it might. So cheers to that, and I will see you guys on the next review. I'll do Nosferatu next, so check it out.